Gibson Les Pauls aren't really made in USA. Hey everybody, Jay Salen here, welcome back to the channel. I try to mainly stick to budget gear on this channel. Over the past couple of years, I've built a pretty great base of viewers who are into budget gear, mostly guitars. So it's no surprise that I often compare budget guitars to more expensive guitars. And most budget guitars I review come from Asian countries, mostly China. And of course, most of the expensive guitars I review are from the big three, PRS, Fender, and Gibson. Oftentimes, even mentioning a brand like Firefly or Harley Benton in the same breath as PRS or Gibson is somehow viewed as a betrayal. Not only are you shitting all over the people that build the guitars by daring to say that a guitar made by some Chinese dude is just as good as an American-made guitar, but somehow you are also un-American. There can be many reasons people choose to only buy American-made instruments, but many people in the comments of my videos have made it clear that they will never buy anything from China because they are, well, communists. I've even been accused of being paid by China, and one viewer actually suggested that I should be investigated by the CIA. True story. At the end of the day, I'm just an average guy that loves guitars. It is my passion and my hobby. I love tinkering with them and buying and selling them almost as much as I enjoy playing them. I'll never get to be a great player, despite many people telling me in the comments section that I should spend more time practicing and less time talking. But for me, the fun of guitars and gear is talking about gear. If I didn't love talking about guitars and gear and enjoy doing shootouts between expensive name brand guitars and budget guitars, then I wouldn't be running this channel. I mean, the point of this channel, quite literally, is to talk about guitars. As I have said before, I don't hate USA-made guitars. I don't hate any guitars that I know of, except maybe Ovation Acoustics with that plastic back. Never been a fan. Anyway, I just find it interesting that people get so offended and worked up when you start comparing a budget guitar made in China to, say, a Gibson Les Paul. There is a certain percentage of guitar players that are just blindly loyal to their favorite brand, and nothing else will ever measure up, and oftentimes, part of that brand loyalty is the stamp on the back of the headstock that reads, Made in USA. Many people that criticize me over the Chinese-made guitars I review are very adamant that they will only buy USA-made guitars to avoid any of their money going to China. But are the guitars that we famously associate with made in the USA actually still made in the USA? What exactly is required for a product to be labeled made in the USA in the first place? Well, according to the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, which is an independent U.S. agency that protects consumers and promotes competition by enforcing federal laws against deceptive, unfair, and anti-competitive business practices, a product can only be labeled Made in the USA if all or virtually all of its significant parts and processing are from the United States. According to the Federal Trade Commission, this means that very little, if any, foreign content or processing should be involved. If a product doesn't meet this strict standard, companies must use qualified claims such as assembled in the USA or made in the USA from domestic and imported components, to be transparent with customers. In fact, in August of 2021, the FTC finalized the Made in USA labeling rule. The labeling rule codified the all or virtually all standard for labels on products. Marketers are now subject to civil penalties if they use an unqualified Made in USA label on a product that is not all or virtually all made in the US, including in catalogs or online. So what does all or virtually all mean? All or virtually all means that the final assembly or processing of the product occurs in the United States, all significant processing that goes into the product occurs in the United States, and all or virtually all ingredients or components of the product are made and sourced in the United States. That is, the product should contain no or negligible foreign content. Now, keeping that in mind, let's look at the Gibson Les Paul, which many consider the flagship Made in America guitar. A Gibson Les Paul is made from a solid mahogany body and neck, a maple cap on the body, a rosewood fretboard, nickel steel frets. The standard 60s models feature Grover tuners. They have dual humbuckers, plastic knobs and pickguard, a Graphtec nut, acrylic inlays, CTS pots, a Switchcraft 3-way switch and jack, and aluminum bridge hardware. The Gibson website doesn't specify what type of mahogany they use, but mahogany is not grown domestically. The internet, however, states Gibson sources its genuine mahogany for guitars from sustainably managed plantations in Fiji and Guatemala. Rosewood is also not a domestic wood. Much of it comes from Brazil and India. There is only one company that I could find making fret wire here in the US, and that company is Jescar. But Gibson doesn't specify what brand fret wire they use, so that could also be made outside of the US as well. Grover tuners are made in South Korea, Taiwan, and China, so the tuners in the standard 60s model could very well come from China. The burst buckers are probably assembled in-house at Gibson, but they most likely contain at least some foreign material. I've been doing research for an upcoming video on USA-made guitar pickups, and there is only 1 or 2 places in the USA that manufactures Alnico magnets, and much of it is made from materials from outside the US, in other words, from China. USA-made Alnico magnets are also extremely expensive, and lead times are very long. Copper wire used in pickups is made here in the US and also in Mexico. I would have to guess that all the injection molded plastic parts come from outside the US too, but I can't be certain. Graphtec nuts are made in Canada. Acrylic for the inlays might be made here in the US, but might also be sourced from outside the US. CTS pots are made in Taiwan. Switchcraft hardware is, however, made here in the US, and it's possible that the bridge hardware for a Gibson Les Paul is made in the US as well. Since Gibson keeps the origin of their parts a closely guarded secret, much of this is speculation. However, Gibson does reveal the identity of parts like the Grover tuners and Graphtec nuts, and of course the woods like mahogany and rosewood are not produced domestically. With all this in mind, it makes one curious how Gibson can stamp Made in USA on the back of their headstocks. Even Fender has removed the Made in USA label from their guitars. According to a Google search, Fender stopped labeling some guitars Made in USA due to inconsistent and strict state laws in California that conflicted with federal regulations regarding the Made in USA standard. Because many components of their guitars are sourced internationally, Fender shifted to the Corona California label to avoid fines and legal challenges, even though the guitars are assembled in the USA. I also looked at the PRS guitar website and could not find one with the words Made in USA on it. The only place I found stating that PRS guitars are made in the USA is in the FAQ of their website. Rickenbacker guitars do have the Made in USA label on the headstock, very small near the logo, but their guitars are made mostly from maple, which is a domestic wood. So it's conceivable that Rickenbacker guitars do follow the FTC's ruling. So how is it that Gibson can get away with continuing to use the Made in USA label? Well, it could be simply that no one has challenged them yet. Gibson is known to be very litigious when it comes to protecting their brand. It would probably take a class action lawsuit or action from the FTC to get them to reverse course. But it brings up some interesting observations. First, it is obvious that being made in the USA is part of Gibson's brand identity and mythology. Some people still believe that Gibson is this down-home guitar builder with skilled luthiers lovingly turning out American-made guitars instead of a massive factory turning out instruments on machines like an automobile plant. Secondly, some people like to get up on their high horse and criticize people like me for buying cheap guitars made in China and Indonesia. Yet by the US government's own definition, the Gibson Les Paul doesn't meet the requirements to be labeled Made in USA, and most likely contains at least some parts that are made in China. I'm sure it doesn't matter to most people where an instrument is made as long as it's made well and is a good value for the money. But the purists want us to believe that USA-made guitars are the best and that they won't buy any guitar made from China. Yet a Gibson Les Paul likely contains some components and/or material from China, and they clearly contain many parts that come from other countries, like the wood, which is most of the guitar. I find it interesting that some people laud Gibson as the ideal Made in USA guitar when most of the guitar itself is from other parts of the world. I've had people comment that they buy Gibson to keep their money in the US. But the reality is, a Gibson Les Paul is a prime example that we live in a global economy with a global supply chain. And like it or not, when you purchase a Gibson Les Paul, even though it has Made in USA stamped on the back of the headstock, a part of your money to purchase that guitar is going somewhere other than to the US of A. And according to the federal government's own definition, the Les Paul isn't made in the USA. Well, that's all I got for this one. I appreciate everyone tuning in. This is Jay Sallin for Jay Sallin Guitar. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time.